Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is January 8th, Wednesday, January 8th. Not just any January 8th. Duh. January 8th, 2025, and a Wednesday at that. Time to get started with another show. The era of crazy is back. Another one of those, I guess, press conferences that will be described only in the newspapers as wide-ranging. Perhaps if they're feeling just a little bit mischievous, they might say rambling. And, well, gosh, there's a lot to round up, and a lot to round up about what you're supposed to take seriously, what you're supposed to take literally. Plenty of warnings from around the internet and social media. People insisting that, no, that thing you're paying attention to is a distraction from the real issue, which is the issue I'm paying attention to. And then, of course, you'll have people saying that, no, that is the distraction. The other issue, or some third issue, or some 15th issue, is going to be the thing. And that's, of course, the point of flooding the zone. I can't tell you which ones are real and which ones aren't. I can only tell you that they happened. And, I think they all deserve some scrutiny, to say the least. But that's certainly the plan. Keep you guessing and keep you chasing 1,000 different items. You have to take it somewhat seriously if the incoming president of the United States, even if he doesn't really understand the role, is threatening military and or economic sanctions actions against all your neighbors, or maybe the whole world, or various parts of the world. We'll, of course, catch up with all of that. Greg Dworkin will join us to do it. I think that was even the theme of today's abbreviated pundit roundup, so I know we'll be hitting on that today. And by the way, welcome back. First appearance in 2025 to the links that Greg actually sends via Skype. I've been having some crazy difficulty. I don't know exactly what's been going on, but for a while, a couple of days now, his links haven't been showing up until later in the day, which is a little bit weird, but here they are. I can see them. It's fantastic, and we'll be going over all of them one by one. All right, let's see. We got that. We have happenings in the courts that also are equally crazy, that also involve, what's his name, the guy who's going to be president later on. They don't make any sense either. Nothing does. All we can do is catalog the atrocities at this point. Meanwhile, in the midst of all of this, California is on fire and experiencing 100-mile-an-hour winds. So, nothing wrong there. Everything seems to be going swimmingly. Pacific Palisades on fire. Homes being destroyed. Wildfire in the hills. I mean, I guess we've seen it over and over again. Now we have these tremendous winds, which I guess, I don't know what the hell is going on there. Is that the Santa Ana winds? I don't know. But I don't care what they call the winds. They're 100 miles an hour. You just call them that. And just making things horrific there. I guess one weird spot in it all, Steve Guttenberg makes an appearance in the middle of all this. I guess he's got a home there in the Pacific Palisades, as do many other wealthy people and people who are both. On the other hand, it's, I guess, mostly packed with people who are very wealthy and don't actually care about anybody else. Whereas Steve Guttenberg apparently, made a bit of money in the acting game and cares about other people. He was on the news yesterday, just, I guess, random man on the street interview as he's moving cars or trying to help people move cars that have been abandoned by people fleeing the flames in the middle of the road that are now blocking emergency workers from getting to the fire and either rescuing people, helping battle the flames, what have you. And apparently they had to bring out bulldozers to just shove everybody's probably cyber trucks off of the road and get out of the way. But he was giving everybody a tip. Look, if you have to flee your car, that's fine. You gotta do what you gotta do. Leave your keys in the car. People are taking their keys with them, as he says, as though it was a parking lot. Which I guess that's the instinct. Lock your car and run away, and then the fire will come by, and then later on you can come back and get your car. You don't want to lose your car. I mean, that's the instinct, but the fire is going to destroy your car anyway, probably, or a car can be replaced. Leave the keys. That's apparently the standard operating procedure. Somebody can then actually get in the car, start it, move it away. I don't know that they're going to move it to any place safe. They're just going to move it off the road. So I guess you could leave it there, but you'll save him the trouble of having to go get a bulldozer, says Steve Gutenberg. But he's being interviewed by a reporter on the spot who's, the guy, it's Steve Gutenberg, just going to the point of the matter and telling people what to do. And it was kind of hilarious. I felt a little bit bad. But the reporter says to him, because to him, he's just a man on the street. And he says, okay, well, thanks for all your advice. And what's your name? Like figuring it's going to be some random dude. And he says, my name is Steve Gutenberg. And if you didn't guess already, you could see it in his face. You could hear it in his voice. Very recognizable. But I guess, maybe we're of an age where we recognize certain actors and actresses and others don't. But then that didn't ring a bell with the reporter either. And do you live in the area? Yeah, over here. Not that matters. And, he doesn't stop and do it. Do you know who I am? Or anything like that. The situation simply does not call for it. But it was a very interesting moment and it will remind you that even if you are inclined at all to say some of these pricks really deserve it, building houses in the edge of the cliff and in a delicate environment, et cetera, yeah, I mean, there is a lot of that, believe me. And there's some great screen captures of Twitter conversations now circulating on other social media of local libertarians made bad, people who were praying for slashes in their property taxes, et cetera, and who are now, one guy in particular, in search of private firefighters to come and protect his home because he really, really, really needs it, and he'll pay any amount just so long as it's not taxes, I guess. It's a wild situation out there, and I don't know, a few bright spots. Steve Gutenberg, I don't know, let's all go watch and see a Gutenberg movie this weekend. Greg Dworkin is here, his house safe from the flames. A great idea, moving it from Pacific Palisades to Connecticut. That'll keep it safe. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Hi. That would be a reason to implement congestion pricing, just so that we don't get those fires delivered to us.
Right. Another crisis for the libertarians
we'll talk
on
about
the East
that.
Coast.
We'll talk about property taxes, too, because that's actually in the lineup today.
Oh, right.
But since you brought it up, I should mention
do?
two things.
All right.
First of all, you may know Steve Gutenberg from some movie that you saw, maybe Police Academy.
Right. That's it.
Maybe 3 Men and a Baby, maybe Cocoon.
Cocoon, that's the one.
But
Wilford Brimley is 12 in that.
Yes, if I'm going to mention those movies,
sure,
I would like to point out, for the sake of accuracy, that Steve Gutenberg is older now, and he doesn't look like what he used to look like.
Oh, okay.
So if you don't recognize him immediately, it's
fine.
okay.
He had a mask partially over his face from the smoke. It was all on fire. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't have. I guess I probably would have been interviewing him and said, "This guy looks like Steve Gutenberg."
Who my 30-year-old self is?
Right. I don't know, but once I heard his voice, I was like, "Well, that's Steve Gutenberg." And then he says, "I'm Steve Gutenberg," to which, of course, and I'm 30, and I don't know who you are.
Honestly, you know how you know he's Steve Gutenberg?
Besides the declaration?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
He smiles.
Oh.
That is so distinctive. I mean, you can't picture Steve Gutenberg without that smile.
That's probably
so if he's not smiling, like, who the hell are you?
Ah, right. And there's no cause to smile.
And I don't think he's smiling in the story.
No, but very civic-minded. It was tremendous. It was a really good moment.
I also am reeling at the idea that people know it's standard procedure to leave your keys in the car.
I don't.
Like, this happens all the time, so therefore everybody should know that. Well,
you would think
all the time
it's
here, so
funny.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Plus, of course, yes. This is the right procedure, and yet panic. I understand people leaving with their keys. I mean, don't do it if you can get to people and educate them. Fine. I don't think you're an idiot for fleeing and taking your keys. Unfortunate, but that's all. But you're already unfortunate. Your house is on fire.
Right.
So
I just, since you brought up the question, and I feel like it's my obligation to answer questions that come up on the show.
All right.
As factually
Why do you feel
as
that
I possibly can, since I know nothing, I look up everything. That's what being a blogger is. So I found this story from Los Angeles, the city of angels. Why is it so windy? Here's what to know about the notorious Santa Ana winds.
There we go.
The Santa Ana winds are responsible here.
Santa Ana windstorm is
blasting Southern California right now, with powerful and potentially damaging gusts.
Yes.
Like up to 45 miles an hour.
Oh, why do I think 100? Am I wrong?
Well, yeah.
Oh.
That's hurricane force winds.
All right.
Now, I suppose in the canyons you can get that.
Well, then they did.
If you say so.
Yes, I have a Sharpie right here.
Right. So Santa Ana winds occur in the fall, lasting through the winter.
Okay, that's now.
Now.
Right.
It can happen up to 20 times a year. As the air gets to the top of the mountain, it races down, acts like a bike with no brakes, and gaining speed. The canyons and passes act like a toll road. The wind piles up, and once it squeezes through, races out in powerful blast winds. So it's not actually in the canyons. It's right past the canyons that it picks up speed. And the wind that's moving down the mountain dries as it sinks. More physics and meteorology, but the drying lowers the humidity. And that fuels fires. And so it's bad.
All right. And they've got them. I must have seen like something on the Weather Channel that said 100-mile-an-hour gusts, but okay.
Well, I don't know.
Maybe there was one.
Maybe there are. In L.A.,
Or
at least,
it was
we're
10.
talking about half that, but that's still pretty big.
Yeah. Well, look, fire and wind.
Bad
right. Especially without Earth. Leave the Earth out of this.
Yeah.
Fire and wind started their own.
Assuming the earthquakes don't happen,
solo
this
project.
is a lovely place to live, except for the wildfires that come every 6 months.
Yes. Mudslides, earthquakes. Right.
But it's beautiful.
Yeah.
When it's not disastrous.
Yeah. Well, if you have 7 houses, go to another one.
Yeah, I suppose.
Okay.
So another thing you mentioned, courts. You were probably talking about the federal courts and Juan Marchand. And whether
it no longer matters.
Trump or Aileen Cannon trying to sit on the Jack Smith report, but we don't know how that's going to turn out. But there's another very important court thing that's going on, and it happens to be statewide, not federal.
The tennis court.
Not that court.
Basketball.
The North Carolina Supreme Court.
Right. Oh, yes. No, true. Forgot about that one. But yes.
So there's an election, and what happens is the Democrat in the Supreme Court in election in North Carolina, the Democrat wins by a very small majority.
Well,
naturally,
no, that can't
Republicans
happen.
object because only Republican wins are legitimate.
Right.
Okay. So they blocked the partisan North Carolina Supreme Court to its own election, blocked certification.
Yes, after like 19 recounts, and they're just, look, we're really sure this is actually the way it came out.
Right.
Well,
so what does that all mean? Everybody assumed, including me, that if the North Carolina partisan Supreme Court blocked the certification of a Democrat winning, that they were going to go all out of their way to, be like John Roberts and just be completely, totally off the walls partisan. But that, in fact, may not be the case. Here's a report by Brian Anderson.
I wanted it to be the case. Yes.
Called Anderson Alerts. It's on Substack where some of the good stuff goes.
Anderson Alerts. Here's one.
Here's one. Here's an alert by Anderson.
All right. Here's Ann Anderson.
Alert by Anderson. These are
like
replacement alerts. Will the Supreme Court election be overturned? Conservative justices throw cold water on the idea.
Oh.
In a revised order, two GOP justices pushed back on Republican Griffin's effort to overturn the Democrat Riggs' apparent win.
Wow, they're going to have to arrest those guys.
Republican Justice Richard Dietz didn't think Griffin's request should have even been considered.
It shouldn't. He's correct. What's wrong with you?
On the heels of hefty public backlash over the 5-2 conservative majority state Supreme Court order, Justice Allison Riggs, the High Court,
she's on the court
by
now.
Their Democratic colleague, Justice Allison Riggs, the High Court revised its order to more clearly lay out their reasoning. While the High Court is still blocking certification and plans to review the matter, 2 GOP justices said Griffin's effort to discard the ballots of more than 60,000 voters not going to be a good idea.
All right.
And
well,
one
that's
conservative on the bench, Dietz, actually made a very interesting comment. Because
screw that guy. Is that what he said?
He had always...
The guy who's trying to do this.
He had always said, I'm for bipartisan things. I really hate dissenting opinions.
Well...
but in this case, even though I don't...
I don't know if I like that. Yeah.
I'm doing it. Like, why is he doing it? It's just really strange. Well,
his view is strange.
In a rare dissenting opinion, reports by Anderson says,
right.
In a rare dissenting opinion,
From
Republican Supreme Court Justice Richard Dietz noted his disagreement In a scathing 6-page dissent, Dietz said the matter shouldn't have even been considered. Permitting post-election litigation seeks to rewrite our state's election rules and, as a result, remove the right to vote in an election from people who already lawfully voted under the existing rules. That invites incredible mischief.
Yes.
It will lead to doubts about the finality of vote counts, encourage novel legal challenges that delay certification, and fuel an already troubling decline in public faith in our elections. Dietz called Griffin's effort to toss out the votes of 60,000 people whose voter registration information lacked complete driver's license or Social Security information almost certainly meritless. While Dietz said some of Griffin's concerns with how the state elections board administers the photo ID law, Virginia has one, right? But you do it a little differently because, like, you issue them.
Well, I don't even know what the law is here anymore now that I think about it. But yes, we used to issue, and I think we still do, issue voter ID papers, but there's no photo on them. But I don't know why we still issue them, since now they've begun asking for photo ID at the polls. But for the longest time, we had these photo-less IDs that they never asked for.
All I know is that the party that claims to want less government and make things cheaper so your taxes can go down keeps putting things in that makes it more expensive to, like, do daily business. That's all I know.
Yes, and back for old people, those were called unfunded mandates, and the Republican Party's foundational documentation was against those.
Back in the day. So this is not your father's Oldsmobile, and that's not your father's GOP. So while Dietz says some of Griffin's concerns with how the state elections board administers the law is worthy of discussion, blocking certification ain't the way.
Well, that's nice of them to, respect, like, law stuff, being that they're judges and all.
A concurring opinion from another Republican justice, Trey Allen, issued a concurring opinion defending the decision to take up the matter, but suggested he's not in favor of the idea. The court's order granting Judge Griffin's motion for temporary stay shouldn't be taken to mean that Griffin will ultimately prevail in the merits.
All right.
Democratic Supreme Court Justice Anita Earls also dissented. Mm-hmm. Riggs herself recused herself in the matter. Apparently,
by the way.
Both are on the Supreme Court now. So it's just weird. Republican Chief Justice Paul Newby and Justices Phil Berger and Tamara Barringer didn't share their personal thoughts. But
that's
following Tuesday's Supreme Court order, Democrats are hoping the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals will intervene to bring the election to a close and certify the election.
Yeah, all right. Well, so another state federal crossover there at the end, too.
Right. North Carolina Democratic Party chairwoman and an up-and-comer, Anderson Clayton, whose name you probably know after the last election, after Ben Wickler, probably the most famous and maybe the only famous Democratic Party chair in a state. Justice Allison Riggs won her seat fair and square that will continue to be demonstrated before the courts. North Carolina Democratic Party chairwoman Anderson Clayton said in a statement, Justice Riggs deserves a certificate of election. We're only in this position due to Jefferson Griffin refusing to accept the will of the people. And I think Anderson Clayton is, like, young. She's like 15. She's great.
Oh, all right.
But you'll hear a lot from her over the next few months and years, and it's really good that they're covering this story. So that's happening, and I think people should know.
Yes, and just an extra note. Once again, so the Democratic justice in question, who is on the Supreme Court, actually recused herself from the decision, like the whole thing you're supposed to do and everything. You can be pretty sure that Republicans won't be doing anything like that. But like
Alito and Thomas do all the time.
Yeah. But kudos then
for people to, good civics model for people to follow.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Thank God that there are some Republicans on the Supreme Court who actually think, well, this might not be a great idea to just ignore the elections, and actually are going to say so.
Right. Now, here's another topic.
They better do it.
Completely a different state. This is New York, and in fact, it's New York City.
Starts with an N, though.
Starts with an N. New York City, and now... It also starts with
Nashville.
Congestion pricing.
Nougat. Oh, yeah. Right. Oh, big
very interesting
topic
experiment.
Because it happened in New York.
Well, it's an interesting experiment in politics and civics.
Yes.
Okay. And the interesting experiment in politics is that you have New York City.
We do.
It's got 8 million people. But during the day, it gets bigger.
Yeah.
Because people commute from Long Island and Connecticut. I don't know the Long Island numbers. There's at least 3,000 a day from the 3 million people in Connecticut that commute by car to New York City, Lower Manhattan. And what happens is that the way congestion pricing works is that if it's below 60th Street, if it's at the heart of the financial district and 34th Street where the Empire State Building is, Madison Square Garden, that part of town, you got to pay $9 a day for a car. Up to 21
you would have
bucks
to do
a
that
day
to park
for
it
an
anyway.
18-wheeler for a semi.
Well, all right.
Okay, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to decrease traffic in that area.
Yes.
If you're a commuter, try to get you to take mass transit and use the money not only to lower asthma rates and improve health and decrease the amount of time it takes to get from one place to another in that area, but also use the money to bolster the mass transit, subway system, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the idea. Kathy Hochul, the embattled governor. I think everything about Kathy Hochul is embattled because, she's awful and she can't make a decision.
It's one of those.
So
things
the election
that
was
gets stuck with
coming
her.
up, and she was afraid that introducing and going through with this congestion pricing, which actually was forced through by the now disgraced Andrew Cuomo.
All right. Well.
Who thinks he's running for mayor in New York City at some point.
Oh, gee.
So Andrew Cuomo, the ex-governor, forced this through, and Hochul had the decision of what to do about it as the election was looming. She didn't want to lose seats on Long Island, where the commuters come from.
Right.
So she delayed it until after the election in a mealy-mouthed, I don't know, I can't decide, I look weak kind of way.
Yes.
Which is
We
what
did see
she's
this.
famous for. Then the election happens. Democrats actually do pick up some seats in the state, so you could argue that politically she was justified, even though economically and everything else, health-wise, whatever you want to think about it, congestion pricing is good, and therefore she should have done it. But she didn't until after the election. Now it's implemented. Today is like the fourth day.
Yes.
And
Something
it's
like that.
It's sort of working.
There are
And when I
fewer
say
cars
sort
in
of
the way.
working, I'm going to send you a couple of images
All right.
to show you. I'm showing David. Like you people listening, you don't get to see it.
Well, I'll react for you. Wow. That's
Okay.
so illustrative of the situation.
Yeah.
This is a chart.
So it's a
A
chart,
line graph.
and it's looking at before and after traffic
Yeah.
and commute times. And the way they measure it is commute times. And they picked two different routes. One that was completely within the congestion zone.
Okay.
And that's the one on the left. And there's no change. I'll explain that.
Oh.
And then one where it starts at the Holland Tunnel. So you're talking about the bridge and tunnel people, as we used to call them.
Hey. Yeah.
And then
That's New Jersey.
Then gets into the congested area.
Okay.
And that has a significant decrease, which you can see the blue is before and the red is after.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden, the commute time got cut in half, more than half.
Hey. I'm calling Danica Rome.
Right. So what happened here? What happened is that if you are within the congestion pricing area completely, this area is now dominated by what are called FHVs, for hire vehicles.
Oh, okay.
Uber, Lyft, taxis.
I see. And in New York,
They
that's
have
actually
free reign.
effing hot cars. I don't know
Right.
what. Okay.
Right?
Mhm.
Grand Theft Auto. So these cars dominate the area now, but the commuter cars,
Yeah.
you can't find them anymore.
Good.
That's what they want. So, for example, if the congestion pricing starts at 60th Street and below, garages on 62nd Street have tripled their prices.
Hey.
You park there, and then you take the subway down.
Yeah.
That's what they wanted. That's
Okay.
what they wanted to force you to do. And that's what people are actually doing.
This is the future Democrats wanted.
Yes.
Oh, all right.
So that part of it, even after it's only 4 days, and you can already see it's working as intended.
Nature is healing.
Nature's healing. Now, there are some things you can do to make it even better if you have the political will. Right? You can jack up the price on vehicles for hire.
Yeah. Can we?
And try to decrease that. I mean, that would, make people scream, because you still have to get from one place to another. And if you want to get your Uber and if you want to get your taxi, you really don't want to have to pay more. And you want to be able to get it. You want them to be there to pick you up. So I'm not sure about how good an idea it is from a consumer point of view. Not all things that are a good idea on paper are a good idea in real life. We'll see about that. But so far, what they've done works to the point where you look at this and say, what the hell is wrong with Hochul? Why didn't she do this beforehand?
Yes.
The number of people who are benefiting it are far greater than the number of people who aren't benefiting from it.
Also, those people individually are greater, I think.
You think?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, as it turns out, I guess the reason she didn't do it is what is making itself evident in the paper. The New York Times is busying itself interviewing people who feel inconvenienced by this.
Right.
And featuring their stories like apparently, and of course, everybody who's being interviewed and saying, oh, I have to now pay an extra $9 to go, I don't know, uptown, downtown, whatever it is, to visit my kids. And then it turns out that the guy is like a billionaire property developer. Like, okay, so pay the $9.
Yeah, who's like 3 blocks away from his kids and won't walk.
Right, yeah. Take a taxi. I thought everybody was into that. Hire a limousine if you want.
Right. So it's working, and it's just an interesting experiment in life.
Yes, right, true, and it's been all the rage, mostly because it's happening in New York, and we have major media there.
In other places, there's no reason it won't work in New York.
Okay, well, do we get one of the giant Ferris wheels out of it, or what? No? All right, well then, not worth anything to me.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I invaded a country while we were away, just getting in practice for the incoming Trump administration. But we have more to round up, not just invading other countries, but also issues closer to home.
Well, Anglican priest, the Reverend Daniel, pointed out something that's really quite interesting about all the noise Trump is making about Greenland, Canada,
cold,
and Panama.
Warm.
Right? And what do they have in common other than Trump saying the U.S. has a right to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America and take over all these other countries by force if we feel like it?
Yeah, that was another twist.
What ties it all together? The Reverend Daniel points out, just keep in mind, Greenland, Canada, and Panama all control routes for Russian oil tankers.
Oh, whoa. Yeah, I guess they do.
So is he just making noise to placate Putin? Is he serious about placating Putin? You never know with this guy, because he's insane.
Yeah, I guess
Crazy Eddie. President Crazy Eddie decided that, the best thing to do is threaten everybody, and so he did. We'll get to that a little bit more. I want to do something really boring first, though.
Okay.
And just to mention it, because if you're not a homeowner, you may not get it. If you don't live in a state like New York or California, you may not get it. Mm-hmm. But property taxes are what Joe Biden would call a BFD.
Okay.
They affect everything. How your schools are paid for, how city government works.
Yes.
So this is a report in Slate, schools and city governments rely on property taxes. What happens when homeowners revolt? What happens when those revolting homeowners get a hold of, the levers of power here? Yeah. Property tax reforms may address some local government inequities, but you get interesting sidelights and fallout that you may not expect. And he uses this as prime example, Prop 13 in California, 1978.
Okay.
And I remember, having friends who lived in California, somewhat conservative friends who were all in on this tax thing because they were paying too much tax. And so it passed. It was fairly popular at the time, still in existence as far as I know to a certain extent.
Uh-huh.
Radical tax cut that transformed the state and shocked the whole country as it's described in the article.
Yeah.
Property taxes would now not be based on the current value of a home, but what you paid for it originally with a slight adjustment. Unless you had a major add-on, like you added three-quarters of a house or 10
People have done
houses
that.
worth to your original property.
Around here we have total tear-downs and rebuilds.
So the measure resulted in education spending cratering, unequal property taxes that persist today. And basically what happened is, since you were paying taxes on what you paid for the house originally,
yeah,
okay, nobody wants to sell their house.
Yeah, okay.
So you're punishing home sales. You're locking in existing residents so that property market in California is, shall we say, far from dynamic.
All right, I see.
And if you're a young person trying to buy a home, you can't. The prices are exorbitant because, and then once you pay your exorbitant price to get it,
yeah, then you have the big.
Then you have to pay taxes on what you just bought. Not what the guy who was selling it was paying for. So the guy selling it to you is paying $10, and you're paying $1 million on taxes. I mean, it's just crazy stuff.
Yeah, I'm surprised people haven't come up with rent to own somehow.
It really discourages sales to young people.
I can see that. Sure. Right. And, actually, even without that, in other parts of the country, still home prices are too high, but it can only exacerbate things, I'm sure.
Right. So then the Wall Street Journal recently declared that we're currently in the middle of a different property tax revolt.
Oh.
And you don't have to look far to see its reach. States and cities around the country are questioning whether the property tax, the most important source of local tax revenue for school districts and cities around the country, is in need of serious reform or abandonment. Okay. Georgia adopted a Prop 13-like measure. Florida revised its homestead exemption, effectively cutting property taxes for all resident homeowners, which is a good thing because, you can't even afford insurance, so you can't sell the house anyway. Wyoming mirrored a number of other states by passing an amendment to tax residences at different rates from commercial property, which makes sense. North Dakota voters considered, but rejected, repealing the property tax in its entirety. And the Chicago City Council voted 50-0 against a property tax increase proposed by the city's mayor.
Okay.
So what's going on here? An increase in value of your home doesn't give you cash in hand, and property taxes are generally based on the current market value. So when the tax bill comes due, owners are mad, despite the fact that they're now sitting on much more valuable assets. I'm really angry because I got rich on paper. And so a lot of what you see doesn't always make sense until you figure out what's going on here. Local governments haven't responded to the increasingly large residential property tax bases with property tax cut rates, or at least not big enough cuts to make the owners of these houses happy. I live in a very modest raised ranch here in Newtown. It's worth on paper a lot more than when I bought it in 1989.
Sure.
But as the price of the house went up, our property taxes went up, but not to the same extent by any means. What we do here in Connecticut is every, 5 years, I don't even know what the number is, you get a reevaluation. When they reevaluate it, they still don't evaluate it up to what the price is now. So you get a break in that sense, but the property taxes have definitely gone up. But the value of the house has gone up too.
Yeah.
So what's the problem? I don't see a problem. Some people see a problem. They don't like it. They're on fixed income. They don't like it when any taxes go up. We hear about that all the time.
Sure.
You're making me move out of town because my taxes keep going up and my fixed income on Social Security or my pension stays the same. It's not fair. You're screwing me.
Yeah.
Well, you're 82 years old and we have like a whole bunch of people in town with kids and they have to go to school and we have to pay the teachers. Not my problem. Well, yeah, I mean, this is the argument we have every year when it comes time to fund the schools.
Yeah.
Which is 80% of our budget.
Yep. Right. True. I guess there's no particular entitlement to live somewhere forever. If you can afford it, you live there. If you cannot afford it, you do not. It kind of sucks when you've been there for 50 years and you're pushing me out.
You're pushing me out of town where I'm going to sell my house and be rich.
I guess. Yeah, that would be difficult. And eventually,
but,
it solves itself.
Your friends here and older people, I can attest to it since I'm an older people.
Sure.
Don't always love change and being pushed to change.
Right.
Certainly when the young whippersnappers are pushing you to change, it's not fun.
I wouldn't want it to happen. And it will. But I wouldn't want it to. I understand that.
I'm just saying it's all really, really super interesting. And even though it's boring, it affects everything. And so now it becomes federal because the Republicans pushed through a SALT tax reduction, state and local tax deduction.
Everything
used to be available in New York State. Now it's not. And the SALT people are really mad. And they tend to be Republicans because the people most angry are the ones with the more expensive houses in the Republican suburbs. And whether or not they wind up ultimately blaming Republicans for it or not, it's an open question, and it remains to be seen because they certainly haven't so far.
Right. It's an open question to which the answer is no.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, at least it's open. That's more than we can say for a lot of things.
The question as to whether Republicans are blamed is strictly a question of whether or not Democrats run on it.
Oh, okay. Well,
because that's the only way to get it in, because this stuff is so boring, it's the only way to get it interjected into the body politic.
Boring. There we go. See? Even then they can...
But it's important, and so I covered it anyway.
Oh, well, I don't have anything that says important.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
That's all I've got, because that fits the mood of the electorate.
Well,
I'm in touch
with
people. Oh, that's true. We do have that one.
Yeah, that one.
All right. Well, okay, so property taxes, something, congestion pricing, something.
Okay, so let me go, since this article happens to mention the paragraph, let me just read you the one short paragraph.
All right.
Because property taxes are mostly imposed by local governments, often very small ones, like our towns.
Small government, boo.
They often lead to massive inequality. Consider Connecticut, where homeowners in poor Bridgeport pay twice the tax rate as those in nearby rich Westport.
Oh.
And homeowners in super rich Greenwich pay even less. The local property tax effectively punishes people for living near poorer people, as sharing a city or town with poorer people means your tax rates are higher and your public services are less.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's weird. I mean, the whole thing is weird. And that's why addressing it can help to address local inequities, but there's not always the political will to do that.
Okay. I could see that.
Anyway, so now we have the insane president doing an insane press conference.
Oh, all right.
And I just want to read a couple of straight news stories. And I think it's important to follow this over time.
All right.
Because it'll give us an idea of just how much sane washing is going on and how much isn't. Like, it's not bad now, but I suspect it's going to get a whole lot worse for the next couple of years.
That seems to sound suspicion.
This is the Associated Press, otherwise known as AP.
Okay.
Takeaways from Trump's Mar-a-Lago press conference.
Oh, yeah, it was at Mar-a-Lago. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, speaking of reporters at his
Crazy
Mar-a-Lago
town,
club,
USA.
Trump would not rule out using military force to seize control of the Panama Canal and Greenland, citing national security interests. Remember, Russian oil routes. Greenland is an autonomous territory of Denmark, a longtime U.S. ally, founding member of NATO. Washington relinquished control of the Canal of Panama in 1999. That was 25 years ago.
Right. Prince wrote a song about it.
Yeah. 25 years ago? 1999?
Earlier than that. But, I don't know. I don't think the Panama Canal was actually mentioned in the song. No.
Okay.
But 1999, yes.
Right. And I don't even know if, if anybody else wrote a song about the Panama Canal.
I don't know. Van Halen wrote a song about Panama, ostensibly. It had the word Panama in it.
Well, Arsenic and Old Lace had Panama figured. very importantly in the plot. So
okay,
always
well,
that.
We
That's
are
like
of
one of the
different
greatest movies of all
generations.
time, with Cary Grant and others. Trump also criticized the late President Jimmy Carter, just as his remains are being transported, this is so in character, from the Carter Presidential Center in Georgia, Washington, for 3 days to state funeral rites, and he escalated his threats against Hamas, warning anew that all hell will break out in the Middle East if the Israeli hostages still being held in Gaza aren't returned before he takes office.
Oh, okay. So an October surprise, but for Israel and not an October, and also probably not a surprise.
Right. Trump, now this is
and not our
interesting
hostages.
how AP describes it, again, in terms of sane-washing.
Yeah.
Trump ran on an isolationist America First agenda, but since his win, Trump has been increasingly preoccupied with a new imperialist agenda, threatening to seize control of the Panama Canal, Greenland, and even Canada, a top U.S. ally and trading partner. Again, a reminder, Russian oil routes. The billionaire Elon Musk, a frequent presence at Mar-a-Lago, stories are that Trump's getting tired of him already, even suggested in a survey posted on X that the U.S. should liberate the people of Britain from their tyrannical government.
Britain.
I think that's been done already. Like we did that in 1776.
Well, we liberated ourselves from their tyrannical government, but we left the Britons behind.
He just wants a reboot.
We saved children, but not the British children.
It's been done. Unless you pay for it, we're not doing it. Asked Tuesday whether he would rule out using the military in Panama and Greenland, Trump refused to do so.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
And Don Jr. said we need Greenland for national security purposes, unspecified.
He went there to say it.
Yeah.
He didn't just call him and tell him. By the way, I am astonished that Donald Trump Sr. convinced Donald Trump Jr. to fly to Greenland, and he didn't just slam the door behind him and said, don't come back.
Right.
But, all right.
They told me it was Iceland.
Yeah.
Greenland's not green.
Greenland.
Iceland's really pleasant, and like, what's going on here?
Greenland is quite, the middle of it is a little cold, but the coastal area is quite photogenic.
Mixed transition messages. Trump repeatedly complained that President Joe Biden has been undermining his transition of power. Even as other members of his team have offered praise for the current administration's cooperation. I mean, the guy's crazy. I'm just letting you know. Trump railed against Biden's move this week to ban offshore energy drilling. They will not stand, Trump said. I will reverse it immediately, and we will drill. Of course, the problem is there's not much oil to drill anymore. I mean, the peak oil thing is like we're there and we're going past it, and there's not much Trump can do about it.
Why aren't we seizing Saudi Arabia?
And the thing is, he's claiming he will, and then he won't deliver. And so we'll see how that works out.
Well, like the price of eggs, essentially. Right. I'm no longer interested in that. Although I do think everybody should be hooting and hollering at them about their eggs.
Right. Now, I can give you specifics on it, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how this is being covered. In the New York Times, which is no friend of impartial truth when it comes to Trump, dripping faucets and seizing Greenland, Trump is back and chaos ensues.
Yeah.
That's true, actually.
Yeah.
So they did a good job with this one. This is David Sanger. And we'll see how long that lasts. There was a vow to rename the Gulf of Mexico by presidential decree to Gulf of America.
Sure.
We'll just call them freedom fries. Mr. Trump's family and supporters like to say we are so back, and they are without doubt. Yet, as the man who will be president again smung out threats and angry denouncements and personal grievances for more than an hour, something else was back, the chaotic stream of consciousness presidency. This is absolutely what I wasn't looking forward to for the next 4 years.
Yeah, it is a little exhausting.
Dreadful.
It is. You don't know what to pay attention to. It's all crazy. So you could just say that, but
it's
that's
like
not enough.
Part of it is overdosing on crazy so that you stop paying attention. So then I can set up camps and you won't even be listening anymore because your eyes have glazed over.
Although it's all equally crazy. So I say pay attention to whatever part interests you, and someone else will take care of the rest.
Right. So there are several differences in this version of Trump that are easy to overlook in a man who can move in an instant from the failures of American plumbing to the need to revive the territory-grabbing spirit of William McKinley. This time, he appears eager to get going in a way he was not in 2017. He railed at the flurry of executive orders Biden's issued in recent days. He's particularly angry about one that barred offshore drilling along much of the U.S. coastline, which he said he would immediately reverse, except he's going to have to take it to court to do that, so he can't immediately reverse it.
Yes, no, whatever. Yeah, there's always the do it anyway and apologize later, but he doesn't apologize. you could sue me over it, but I'm going to do it. Or he just, I don't know, I wanted to go play golf. I forgot what I said.
Right. And then Sanger goes on to say, what's really happening here is Trump is taking over the stage and pretending he's already president, and nobody's saying boo about it.
Yeah.
Which is true. So I'm glad that they covered that aspect of it.
Yes. And I mean, what we discussed a little bit yesterday and is the point of a lot of these court cases. There are now three, maybe more now. Just three that I can think of. Court cases in which the Trump lawyers are arguing that he is effectively president right now and has the right to exercise executive authority in the United States. And it's important for their case because they need them to be the case for them to win their cases. But you all know he has not been sworn in as president.
Yeah,
right?
But I don't understand that in the sense that all of these are just delays and the courts never rule right away. And so by the time they get around to it, it'll be post January 20th and everything will be moot. And why are they doing this?
I don't know. But yeah, the scary part of it is that he had the people who has signing the arguments, signing these briefs for the arguments are people he's going to make top DOJ officials later on. But you're right.
Sure,
that's
but it won't matter.
Point. Yeah, it's a good point that they will be top officials before there's any kind of ruling on their crazy pronouncement, and they can, if it suits them later, just say I never got a ruling on it, so it doesn't matter. It was just something I put on paper.
We'll bring it up some other time for his fourth term.
Right. Like maybe to say, he's still president after he's president. Yeah, maybe. It's a little concerning. Anyway.
The Guardian.
Yes.
Excuse me. This isn't even the Guardian. This is the
Yes,
Independent.
I see.
In Great Britain, which is
you could call
more
it
of a
either
middle
one.
of the road paper than the Guardian or Financial Times.
Yeah.
And their headline is Trump kicks off rambling press conference by airing grievances.
Mm-hmm. Festivus.
Could have just called it Festivus, absolutely.
Right.
And then starts threatening U.S. allies. That's the headline.
I'll kill you all, including
Trump
the one
suggests he could
Prince
use force, economic or military, to turn American allies into vassal states.
Yes. I don't think he knows what vassals are, but
we're going to make you look up medieval history. We're going to make you learn what vassal is. We're going to go over the history of the Holy Roman Empire. It's all important now because look what's going on here.
Prima nocte, yeah. All right. All the good things.
Yeah.
From way back when. All right.
We'll make you experts on when you use French terms to describe the law and when you use Latin terms to describe the law.
That's
because, nothing makes sense to a non-lawyer.
Right. Well, not if you don't speak those languages. And I don't. Although there is a certain logic to it, but I don't have the time to explain it now. Also, I don't know that my explanation is right. So I'll refrain.
Well, it's the logic du jour, ex partito.
Yes. Oh, true. Well, actually, I mean, it does have to do with basically like in our law, having descended from English law. If you're using a French term for it, that's because that was Norman law, and that's the heritage of it. And if you're using Latin for it, it's largely because it was either more broadly associated with Roman law, or at least non-Norman.
Right, and if you don't like Norman law, take it up with William the Conqueror, because he had something to say about it.
Yes, right. He just seized the territory and annexed it, like Canada or Greenland.
Yeah, or Panama.
Right. So, sometimes as it turns out.
And it turns out, why William the Conqueror did that? Because they were Russian oil.
Yeah. Although, William the Conqueror was the Don Jr. of his day, I guess, and his dad was a big muckety-muck, and he wasn't giving him his inheritance, so he just said, I'll steal England instead.
Yeah, I'll just take it.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have a similar situation, I guess, developing here, and... Wow.
So the Independent says, Trump blamed the 46th president, that would be Biden, for a host of ills, real or imagined, some new, some familiar. He repeated old grievances about windmills.
Oh, yes, right.
With a new twist about how their blades are not easily recyclable. And blamed Biden for low water pressure in modern showers.
Right, he loves that.
He suggested the incumbent is somehow in favor of banning natural gas-powered heat and forcing electric heat upon unwilling Americans, and at one point offered up a bizarre and completely fictitious assertion that members of Hezbollah, the London-based Islamic militant group, Lebanon-based, not London-based.
Yeah, I was going to say they moved.
Were present
at
the January 6th attack on the Capitol, rather than his own support.
Hezbollah. By the way, also controlling the price of eggs as well.
Yes.
Hezbollah was behind. This is now Antifa did January 6th, no. Trump people did it, but they were tourists, and it was a day of love. But also could have been Hezbollah. Yeah, Hezbollah got introduced out of nowhere. And I guess now the job of the newspapers is to write, how could you plausibly claim, even if there's no particular evidence for it, that it was Hezbollah? There's going to be a feature about that. There was a guy
know what Hezbollah
who was
is.
there.
He thinks Hezbollah is like one of those card games the old ladies used to play, like canasta, or maybe a board game like Mahjong.
I don't know what he thinks it is. That is interesting.
They played canasta, Mahjong, and Hezbollah when I was growing up, and that's why America isn't what it used to be. Let's go back. Make America great again. He doesn't know what it is.
No, or he may think it's a luncheon meat, like Hezbollah or something like that.
Something like that.
Hezbollah, January 6th.
Now, Trump soon moved on from casting aspersions on the man he'll replace and turned to making veiled threats of war.
Oh, good.
It started with a non-sequitur about the Panama Canal, which was built by American forces more than a century ago, under terms of a treaty negotiated by the late 39th President Jimmy Carter. By coincidence, Trump began expounding on the treaty at the same moment that a military honor guard was preparing to load the late former president's remains aboard one of the bespoke 747 aircraft used as presidential transport. Neither of Trump's claims are grounded in fact. The canal is operated by Panamanians who suggesting the U.S. is somehow being overcharged as roots in the president-elect's longstanding belief that fair treatment means preferential treatment. But he ominously suggested the canal status was under discussion.
Yes.
Then he attacked Mexico and Canada.
Right. And Hezbollah
not
owns
literally,
the canal.
but then again, he's not president yet.
Right. Doesn't matter to him. His view is that China controls the canal somehow. Not Hezbollah, but China. And therefore something, and we're going to beat up Panamanians. I don't know. He just wants to seize a bunch of things, I guess. That makes him look very strong, and I guess that's really it. Although he did sort of rule out invading Canada. He said he was going to do it economically.
Yeah. But he didn't rule out invading Panama or Greenland. Right. Trump went further by suggesting that Denmark should give up any claim to Greenland and allow some sort of plebiscite on joining the U.S. or face consequences for not doing so. Right.
Danish pastry, now freedom pastry, and the tariff goes up.
Right. Now, it's unclear whether Trump is serious about pursuing coercive policies to force a trio of sovereign nations to give up their own right to self-determination, but as he prepares to return for office, the incendiary comments represent a break from decades of American commitment to post-Second World War international order. That's really the important thing. It's not a big shift for Trump, but it's a huge shift for the world.
Oh, well, sorry, world.
Yeah, so there's that.
Well, yeah.
Now, something else I should mention before time runs out, and that is the elder Le Pen.
Yes.
Marie Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen.
Yes.
Is no more.
Right. That's right.
He's dead. He's gone.
No more alive.
Paris was celebrating.
They were. Fireworks, I even saw. Singing, chanting, huge crowds. I mean, this is what Trump's passing is going to look like. I think you knew that.
Yeah. But, Mark Lippman, our Daily Kos commenter in the Pundit Roundup, who lives in France, expat, and tells us about what's going on there, has a quote from, which he kindly translated for us, from the left-leaning Le Humanité paper.
I think we can make out what that means.
They went with the headline, "Hate was his profession," along with a close-up of the famous dagger inscribed with J.M. Le Pen, 1st Foreign Parachute Regiment.
Yes. Oh, and I saw some reaction to this.
I didn't know about it. But
me neither, but I've learned about it this morning.
Yeah, the dagger wasn't military issue. It was Le Pen's personal property, which he carried with him when he was a parachutist deployed to Algiers during the War for Independence. He left it behind in the Muslim quarter after torturing and killing of the leaders of the independent movement in front of his wife and children in their home.
Very
It was found by a family member the next day. It's now displayed in a museum in Algiers, which is why it's famous. The knife itself is a type that was only made by a factory in the Ruhr Valley, Germany, during the years 32 to 44, the Nazi era.
Yes.
This is what Le Pen carried in Algeria as a sort of lucky charm according to his own words.
Yeah. Now, I did see that sounds more authoritative, that description. I saw others saying it's actually either was or was modeled after or something like a Hitler Youth dagger that was issued to the kids. I don't know whether that's really true or not. It's bad enough that it did what it did. I'll just go with the museum on that one. They're the ones that it's their museum. You tell me what it was. He tortured somebody with it. All right.
Meanwhile,
I don't care where it was
a different
made.
magazine, Liberation, went with the hard-to-translate wordplay they often use.
Oh.
The headline, Maréchal de Voilà, is a play on the title of the unofficial national anthem of the Vichy government.
Oh.
Maréchal nous voilà.
Okay.
The original title, which means Maréchal Pétain, here we are, has been replaced by Maréchal Pétain, here he is, inferring that, yes, he's joining Pétain in hell.
Okay. Gotcha.
Pétain was the Vichy leader who deported 76,000 Jews to concentration camps.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And so, yeah.
Appreciate that.
He's real popular on the left.
Yeah, okay. And now Le Pen gets to, I guess, presumably burn alongside him is the implication.
Right. So people were...
we don't know for sure.
We're celebrating in Paris with champagne.
Yeah. I'm telling you, I saw a video.
Huge
fireworks.
Crowd chanting, he's dead, he's dead, he's dead. Yeah. I got a lot of this stuff.
Vive la France. And good. Terrific. That's how the send-off should go. That's about what I anticipated looking like when Trump goes as well. Unless, of course, his sons are ruling with an iron fist at that point.
Right. And I'm going to leave you last with an observation by Natalie Jackson. This is from the Bad Site. But you can read it on Daily Kos if you want in the Pundit Roundup rather than going to the Bad Site, but I'm giving it to you anyway.
Okay.
And basically what she said is there's an observation that Democrats reduce news consumption when daily news sentiment is negative toward Democrats. Republicans just switch to more conservative stations. And that's super interesting, Natalie Jackson said. And I would hypothesize the ability to just switch to conservative news outlets means the connection that Republicans feel right now to their party is stronger. I heard a ton of, I don't like this Republican, but I just can't vote for a Democrat. That's where this comes from. They only watch conservative stations.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Well, that was a whole lot of crazy. As we did our best to try and round things up, there's an awful lot that we could and should get to. I don't even know where to begin. We'll start in pocket, although really, I don't know whether we would fall prey to the distraction factor. Although we would cover all of the craziness that occurred during the day yesterday if we just scrolled backwards in my Blue Sky timeline, probably. But here's what the things that I took to put aside that I thought were of top importance. Thankfully, we got the Supreme Court story from North Carolina, and I think we're straight on that one. And that one's sounding like it hopefully means that it will be better news in the end. But it was very alarming yesterday to find out that, once again, you could just this is, I guess, what they had planned for that matter, it was what they planned for January 6th, 2021. Trump just simply saying it's impossible for me to lose the election. And remember, that was the claim he was making at the time in 2020. Late 2020 and early 2021, that it was, as he put it, statistically impossible for him to have lost the election. And that's what justified the whole January 6th insurrection in the first place. It's not an insurrection. It's correcting for the cheating that the other side, he claims, was doing. And anyway, as it turns out, it didn't work in 2021, and they didn't need it in 2025. So the plan just moved to North Carolina, where they said it doesn't matter that the electorate says they'd rather have this Democratic/liberal, I don't know if it's a nonpartisan election or not, but an aligned with the Democratic Party nominee or reelected, I guess, to the Supreme Court rather than the Republican. And the Republican campaign, anyway, said, that can't possibly have been the outcome. There must be something wrong. We need the Supreme Court to rule that this number doesn't matter and the other number is the one that does matter, and therefore, with that in mind, the Republican should take the seat. And as it turns out, even the Republican justices were reluctant to do that. That is good news. I'm pleased to hear that. And as of yesterday afternoon, I guess, when I marked the story for, well, yeah, that'll get included, we hadn't heard that Republicans might actually take the whole thing seriously in the, by which I mean using the normal legal approach to things, i.e. the higher number of votes is the one that wins, even though that's not the way we do the presidential elections. I understand that. Anyway, so let's see. Other places in court, other anomalies in court. So I mentioned yesterday, and I re-mentioned during discussions with Greg here, that there are 3 cases wherein Trump attorneys are arguing that Donald Trump is either effectively president right now or enjoys the powers of the executive branch and Article 2 right now in order to steer public policy, or ought to be afforded that power. And they are that in his New York state case, right, where he's been convicted of 34 counts of all sorts of things, but certainly campaign finance violations, obstructions, cover-ups, etc. This is what we know by shorthand as the hush money case that happened in New York, for which he was convicted some 30 how many weeks ago and has been awaiting sentencing this whole time. And in the meantime, we've, of course, had the Supreme Court's ruling about presidential immunity. And that was an invented version of the doctrine. I mean, there was some previously existing presumption of immunities of sort for a sitting president. Of course, we knew that a sitting president couldn't be criminally prosecuted. And when I say, of course, we knew that, I mean, that is to say, we all acknowledge the provenance and I guess legitimacy of the previously existing Office of Legal Counsel opinion on the matter, and it had never actually come to fruition, I don't think, unless I guess maybe at some point they contemplated a criminal prosecution for Richard Nixon, and voila, the OLC came up with a doctrine that said, well, what if we did not, and in fact didn't allow it? And then it stuck, and people kept pointing to it as precedent, even though it wasn't a legal ruling from the Supreme Court. But, we're in that weird gray area. OLC kind of wields that power. People steer away from it, from contradicting their memos wherever they can. It's a system anyway. It's a semblance of stability to say, well, as silly as it is, if we all apply it equally across the board, that will be, that might be okay too. If Democratic presidents can come to rely on this that as well, then fair enough. It applies equally across the board. And by the way, I think that's a mistake we're making about the way that the Supreme Court's interpretation of its own ruling in the presidential immunity case. I don't believe that they actually intend to apply that to Democratic presidents. That comes up in other contexts. But anyway, in his New York case, he sought to apply this separate case. For Donald Trump, we've gone over this a number of times, that he has difficulty, of course, separating personality, right, from his public charges. When he is president, and as it turns out, even when he's not president, he doesn't understand or care about the distinction, let's say, between his personal interests and the country's interests. He doesn't see a dividing line between it. He doesn't understand the difference between public property and private property. He can do whatever he wants with federal property because he's the president. And then afterwards, because he was once president, and even before he becomes president, because he's about to be president, he can just do these things. That's what presidential power means to him. It's not how the rest of us regard it, but he doesn't care and dares you to stop him anyway. So, at any rate, here he has been convicted in state court. Likewise, he doesn't know the difference between federal and state court. And I guess to the extent that he recognizes that there is a difference, he just figures federal court, I don't know, it's What's the difference between state and federal court for Donald Trump? The federal court's bigger and stronger, I guess, because it's federal. So that's about it. Right. Well, there's a federal court ruling from the Supreme Court that has something to do with presidential immunity and certainly expanded the concept of presidential immunity. But there were limitations to it, even in the Supreme Court's own ruling. In Donald Trump's brain, nuance, what? Limitations, what? Never heard of it. All I heard was presidential immunity. There were very clear, well, no, there weren't. There were very clearly, there was very clearly an acknowledgement by the Supreme Court that there were certain instances in which this immunity would not apply, but they were complicated and they weren't particularly well illustrated. So Donald Trump takes from that, I don't understand it, therefore it doesn't exist, therefore presidential immunity is unlimited, and has asserted presidential immunity from being sentenced for his conviction in New York. That's the argument he made to Juan Merchan, the judge in the case, and said, you shouldn't sentence me, and in fact can't sentence me because I've been elected president. And the judge said, well, when you're president, then that immunity might apply. And even then, it's only a might, because after all, you're being sentenced for something that I would not regard as an official act. And you may recall that there was that limitation in the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity, that official acts were immune, unofficial acts, personal acts were not. No, I don't recall that being the case at all. I think you're totally misunderstanding the ruling from the Supreme Court. Well, I'm not. And anyway, it's presidential immunity, and you, A, were not president when you did most of the things that are for which you were convicted in this case, and B, some of the things that actually happened for which you were convicted that did happen while you were president were unofficial acts anyway, and you're not president now. To which Donald Trump's lawyers, who are in fact going to be nominated to top positions in the Department of Justice in 2 weeks, and presumably will assume those jobs, were unafraid and unashamed to sign a brief saying, well, he's going to be president soon, so that should count for something. And that sentencing him is, well, if it's not interfering in the presidency, well, it's not interfering. First, they claimed, of course, that it would interfere with the campaign. It's campaign interference. You can't sentence him in the middle of the campaign because then people will say, oh, he's a convicted felon and maybe not vote for him. And, you can't do that. You can do that, but it's your interpretation of things that we can't. I mean, you can sentence somebody who's running for office, and it's not interference. It's actually telling people real things about the state of the election and letting them make up their own minds about what to do for it. There were plenty of people who were happy to declare outright and even wear T-shirts that said, I'm voting for the convicted felon. I don't know that it would have made a really good argument. Oh, it's election interference. I don't see that it is. You're selling merchandise. You're raising money based on the fact that you are a convicted felon. I think it's actually election assistance. You should have to report to the FEC that this is a contribution in kind to you. Why not? But at any rate, they made that one work. Then, of course, the election ended and they didn't have that excuse anymore. So they just said, well, now you're interfering with the presidential transition. No, you're not. You can't do it. There's no way for this to be interpreted that way. But they were saying it anyway. So they considered it. And Judge Merchan said, again, no, doesn't make any sense to me. All right, well, we're appealing. And I believe they actually filed an appeal in the New York State court system and got a preliminary answer. No, it doesn't make any sense. But they have not yet exhausted their remedies in appeals in the New York State system. But nonetheless, it turns out, according to NBC News and everybody else who's reporting on it, that Trump has filed an emergency petition with the Supreme Court of the United States, and perhaps you've heard of it, that insists that they should intervene based on the presidential immunity ruling of last year and overrule Juan Merchan. Well, there's a couple of problems with this, not the least of which is there's no Supreme Court of the United States No, there's no Supreme Court in the United States. How about that? Why don't we leave it at that? That would be fine. But there's no jurisdiction for the Supreme Court in this case. There's no reason why they should be accepting the case. I don't know that they will. They haven't done so yet. But I guess mostly Trump just wants the headline. He only has to delay by 2 weeks. So you just file and say, there you go, we're appealing to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court may never, ever, ever take this seriously. They may not even have accepted the papers at the door, for all I know, if there were even more papers at the door. But he wanted the headline that says he's appealing to the Supreme Court. And here it is. Trump asks Supreme Court to block New York hush money sentencing. Subheader, a sentencing hearing is set for Friday. This is not in the Supreme Court. This is in New York State Court. It's Friday, they'll do a sentencing hearing with Trump saying he's protected by presidential immunity, despite the fact that he's not president. Lawrence Hurley is the author of this piece for NBC News. President-elect Donald Trump on Wednesday, that's today, asked the Supreme Court to block criminal proceedings in his hush money case in New York with a sentencing hearing scheduled for Friday. And in Trump's opinion, why not ask for it? I mean, one, it'll generate headlines that we're trying to get it done. My people will be happy about that. Liberals will be angry about that. It won't make any difference because it'll never happen. It certainly won't happen before I actually am president, which will moot the whole thing anyway. But the upshot of it will be people saw me get headlines saying I asked the Supreme Court to save me. Then they will see that I don't go to jail, and they will just assume the Supreme Court is on my side, and they'll be afraid to, go to court for anything because it will look like I control everything. And that's all he really wants. But also to not go to jail. But he wasn't going to go anyway, because we already heard that Judge Merchan was saying, we may have a sentencing. We'll just sort of suspend the sentence because you can't send the sitting president to jail. And he probably wasn't going to be willing to say, well, you can go to jail for 8 days or whatever that would be, because, I don't know what he's afraid of. But it's weird and stupid to try to do something like that at this point. And so he probably wasn't going to do it. Well, anyway, what's going on here? The court has asked New York prosecutors, this is the Supreme Court, they should have capitalized the C in this so we would know what's going on. So I guess they actually did respond in some fashion. The court has asked New York prosecutors to respond to Trump's requests by Thursday morning, giving the justices time to act before the sentencing proceeding. They probably really shouldn't even bother, but they're pretending that this is a real petition. So, okay. And this from the filing. Trump's lawyers wrote, this court, the Supreme Court, should enter an immediate stay of further proceedings in a New York trial court to prevent grave injustice and harm to the institution of the presidency, which isn't actually implicated here, and the operations of the federal government. That's the way of backhandedly connecting it to the transition, I guess. He's not in the federal government. They argue that the case should not go forward because Trump was protected by presidential immunity, as recognized by the Supreme Court earlier this year. Well, as recognized by the Supreme Court, pretty much excludes this case. But he doesn't really care or know that there's a difference. The Supreme Court's historic decision on immunity, the Constitution, and established legal precedent mandate that this meritless hoax be immediately dismissed, Trump's spokesman Stephen Chung said in a statement. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office did not immediately respond to NBC News' request for comment. On Tuesday, a New York appeals court judge declined to block the sentencing. Trump was convicted in May of falsifying records relating to hush money that his then attorney Michael Cohen paid adult film star Stormy Daniels in the closing days of the 2016 presidential election. Daniels testified she had a sexual encounter with Trump in 2006, a claim he has denied and yet paid her for. Trump's lawyers argue that some evidence at trial focused on official actions which he took while in the White House. They also take the unprecedented step of saying that a president-elect should have the same protection from criminal prosecution that a sitting president has. Judge Juan Merchan, who presided over the trial, initially postponed Trump's scheduled sentencing in July in the wake of the Supreme Court's ruling setting a new standard for presidential immunity that month. But Merchan later concluded, having postponed things so that he could have time to consider them, he has considered them and comes back and says, I've concluded that Trump does not have immunity at all of any kind until he's sworn in as president. He then directed Trump's sentencing on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records to take place on Friday morning while he's not president. The Supreme Court's contentious presidential immunity ruling came in a separate case in which Trump was charged with seeking to overturn the 2020 presidential election results. With Trump about to become president again, that case has now been dropped. The court ruled that certain official acts taken by presidents are off limits for criminal prosecution. Actions taken by a president in their personal capacities, i.e. paying off porn actresses to be quiet about their sexual encounters, would not be protected. But F that. Trump says they're all protected anyway. Trump's Supreme Court request was filed by a particular lawyer. You may have heard of him, D. John Sauer, whom the president-elect intends to appoint as Solicitor General, his administration's top courtroom advocate. Another Trump lawyer listed on the filing, Todd Blanche, is Trump's pick to be Deputy Attorney General. So, no, these things are not the current state of the law, but in a couple of weeks, these guys will be appointed to these positions, and assuming they take them, they can simply declare, yes, it is. It is the state of the law because, of course, the Department of Justice, that sometimes issues memos that we look to as having the force of law, we can now issue those memos. So you're all wrong about all of that, including the decision that they hailed and have relied on ever since about presidential immunity. They're just going to read the limitations out of it and pretend that it applies to everything that Trump does when he's president, before he's president, after he's president, when he's thinking about being president, when he's eating presidential food, throwing presidential ketchup, whatever it may be. There's a valiant attempt out there on Blue Sky from very skilled and highly respected lawyer Akiva Cohen. We've actually, I think, mentioned his social media discussions before. I mean, he sees it clearly, but what he's seeing, of course, is what it clearly looked like in the before times. And there's some question, you might say, about how things will be, in the after times. But he points out this story and says, hey, he picks up on Steve Herman's post on Blue Sky, which connects to the CBS News coverage of this same story that we just read, saying President-elect Trump, in a request for emergency relief, asks SCOTUS to temporarily block further criminal proceedings in New York State Court, including his upcoming sentencing before he takes office. And he, walks carefully but quickly through this story, what we're seeing here. And, but for most people, and Trump is very well aware of this, people don't really see the nuance of it. I don't know, a court is about to sentence him. So he asked another court to block the, that's how appeals work, right? Yeah, not this kind. SCOTUS has no jurisdiction here. Like, as he says, they haven't even made it past the highest court in New York State yet. And it looks like they're not trying to. But even if they had, what's the basis for federal jurisdiction here, let alone original jurisdiction in the SCOTUS? Okay, so it gets a little weedy and lawyerly here, but I think most people can probably pretty much understand the normal way of doing things. If you're in state court and you want to appeal a state court ruling, you go to the state appeals court, and they're the ones with direct jurisdiction over the outcome at the state trial court. Now, it does sometimes happen that you find yourself in federal court over a ruling made in a state court, and you can do it, and there are ways to get there. One of them is you appeal all the way through the state system, and then when you get what should be the final word from the state system, i.e. from the highest court in that state, whether they style it a Supreme Court or a court of appeals or what have you, and then at that point, when there's no further relief available in the state system, you can then say, I still think there's an error. I want the United States Supreme Court's opinion on what the highest court in that state did. Sometimes they say, I don't care that you want that. We're not going to give it to you. And sometimes they do. They will take it, and they'll, either confirm the state court ruling or not at their discretion, I guess. But you don't simply go, oh, I got a bad outcome from a trial court in New York, the United States Supreme Court is the next stop in all of this. Unless, of course, you can convince 5 of them to say, that's not the way it works, at least for you. And that's what he's counting on here. But yeah, he has done nothing to try to exhaust his remedies. And that's, by the way, sometimes something the Supreme Court will do. They'll say, we have no jurisdiction here, or you don't have standing to come before us, because the rule is you're supposed to do everything you can to get the remedy you need from the state court. And when you've exhausted all remedies there, then you can come and ask us, and we can still decline to do it. So, but, Akiva's working in the old system whereby there were rules and ways of predicting how things would go. And I don't think that that's true anymore. But he's laying out the atrocities here, at the very least. So, yeah, not only have they not made it past the highest court in New York, they haven't really even tried. I guess they went to an appeals court in New York and they said, yeah, you're screwed. But is that the last stop in New York? Maybe there's another level they can take it to. And if so, you're supposed to take it there, but they are just ignoring that. But as Akiva says, if you think you have a hook for federal jurisdiction, there is another way around this, right? You don't have to necessarily exhaust all your remedies in the state system and then appeal to the federal Supreme Court. You can file a case in federal district court in New York, in this case, and seek an order enjoining the state court proceedings. But you can't just skip the whole federal system and go straight to the SCOTUS in the first instance. Well, that's the way it kind of sort of used to work, or mostly. He's not wrong about that. That is the way it used to work. It's just not, what Trump is going to do. And so now the question is, will the Supreme Court either allow him or engineer for him a way around the normal rules? We don't know. But it also, as Greg pointed out, might just be something to waste time until the case is mooted and we never get an answer. And he'll say, I was never proven wrong, but I also got to not have my sentencing, and I'm certainly not in jail. And so most people will just understand that as I'm right and you're wrong. And there's going to be an awful lot of that happening in the next couple of years. All right, let's see. Other stories that I wanted to bring to your attention. There are an awful lot. Oh, yes. Right. So then there was the outrage of Aileen Cannon. And this is sort of interesting from the other angle, right? He's gotten the Supreme Court has no jurisdiction here. It's ridiculous to even ask this question. It's ridiculous to be petitioning them to intervene at this point. There's no basis for Supreme Court jurisdiction. You're in the wrong place. They don't have the authority to say anything, but they're the Supreme Court, so maybe they will. Well, likewise, there's no authority here in this other case, but to hell with it, let's just do it anyway. CBS News reports judge in Trump documents case, that is to say, the Florida federal case filed by Jack Smith originally and overseen by the infamous Aileen Cannon, Trump appointee extraordinaire, who, by the way, then dismissed the charges against Trump in the Florida case, and has had that ruling appealed to the 11th Circuit Court, the federal court. And so, therefore, this case is no longer in Aileen Cannon's hands. But that didn't stop her from saying, I'd like it back in order to help Donald Trump one more time. Judge in Trump documents case, who no longer has this case, temporarily blocks release of special counsel Jack Smith's report. We discussed that this was coming yesterday, and that this, too, was one of the cases in which Trump lawyers were in court saying, you can't do this to me because I'm almost president. And there it is. Lawyers, the federal judge overseeing President-elect Donald Trump's now dismissed case, and it should really say the federal judge who used to have jurisdiction over the now dismissed case, the jurisdiction of it having transferred to the 11th Circuit Court at this point, has temporarily blocked the Justice Department from releasing a report prepared by Special Counsel Jack Smith, even though she's no longer overseeing this case. Isn't that something? Judge Aileen Cannon issued an order on Tuesday purporting, anyway, to prevent the Justice Department from releasing the report while a legal battle plays out. So she says, you can't release the report even though I don't have jurisdiction over this case. The reason you can't do it is because this case belongs to the 11th Circuit. Get it? No. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So, let me, first read through this CBS News report to give you a factual-ish rundown on how Aileen Cannon has injected herself back into this case. Aileen Cannon issued an order on Tuesday preventing the Justice Department, supposedly, from releasing the report while a legal battle plays out. Prosecutors said in an earlier filing that the 2-volume document could be released as early as Friday, pending a decision by Attorney General Merrick Garland, that famously aggressive prosecutor. Earlier on Tuesday, attorneys for Trump's former co-defendants, Walt Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira, filed an emergency motion similar to that which they filed earlier in Cannon's court, asking the appeals court to block the release of Smith's report. Cannon ruled on Tuesday that her order, quote, remains in effect until 3 days after the resolution by the 11th Circuit of the emergency motion, unless the 11th Circuit orders otherwise. Now, the 11th Circuit could tell her, shut up. Your order was meaningless in all of this. Just follow our order. Or they might not. They might not address it at all. But what Cannon is doing is kind of ensuring that it doesn't happen before he can claim straight up presidential immunity by virtue of being president, right? There's no way that the 11th Circuit is likely to rule on this thing anytime soon, but even if they do, Cannon wants and claims to have been able to impose a additional 3-day delay in any release. Based on what? I don't know. It's just there. That's all. You could appeal that, but, then you're going to end up mooting the case anyway. Cannon ruled again that she has, her ruling says it stays in place 3 days after anything the 11th Circuit rules. Even if the 11th Circuit says we rule for immediate release, she says, yeah, I know you say immediate release, but I have an order that says 3 days after your order for immediate release is the soonest that this can come out. The legal wrangling over the report comes less than 2 weeks before Trump's inauguration to a second term in the White House, with the special counsel wrapping up its work before he takes office. Smith oversaw 2 cases against Trump, of course, the documents case in Florida and a case related to Trump's alleged efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election in Washington, D.C. Trump pleaded not guilty to all charges, which have since been dismissed. Have they? though? I mean, have they all been dismissed? I don't know. Certainly the Florida documents cases were dismissed. I don't know what the current status of the Washington case is. They certainly don't intend to prosecute it and go to trial with it. But I'm not certain whether they were dismissed yet. But maybe they have been. I'm no longer sure where we stand in all of this. But the classified documents case remains ongoing in the appeals court. And that's because there were people other than Donald Trump involved in that classified documents case. And the position of the DOJ was, well, it's important that we at least prosecute the people who aren't going to be president and don't have presidential immunity, who participated in the various obstructions and cover-ups here. Federal prosecutors opted to keep the case alive in an effort to reverse Cannon's previous finding that Smith was unlawfully appointed. That was another of the items in the case. Not only do they want to keep it alive to punish people who weren't president, who participated in the cover-ups, but Aileen Cannon included in her order dismissing the case that no charges ought ever to be able to be brought against anyone, including the co-conspirators, because Jack Smith wasn't even really here. He was illegally appointed. It's unconstitutional to have special counsels, or at least this one. And so, therefore, the charges that he brought can't be real either. And apparently they thought, well, maybe we should litigate that and appeal that ruling because it's pretty stupid and has no basis in law. So a good idea. Where were we here? Oh, yes, right. So Smith dismissed the case against Trump, but opted to keep the appeal going as it relates to his co-defendants. Cannon's order on Tuesday noted that she did not make any determination as to whether the special counsel report should be released. Interesting trick here, right? She's blocked release of the report. Has she? Yes. But does that mean that she has made a determination that the report should not be released? No. All she's saying is, I want to block release of the report until at least 3 days after the 11th Circuit decides whether or not to release the report. And so she's technically saying, I haven't made any determination as to whether the special counsel report should be released. I leave that entire matter to the appeals court to decide. But whatever they decide, you can't see it for an additional 3 days. But only 3 days. The Justice Department and the special counsel's office both declined to comment on Cannon's latest move. Wow. And it is quite a move, isn't it? And it's very tricky, right? I didn't say you can't release this report. Don't say that that's good. I'm not blocking the report because I don't think it should be released. I'm blocking it because I want an additional 3 days of delay for Donald Trump. Reason? I don't actually have one. Yeah. Well, that's kind of disturbing, to say the least. Meanwhile, there has been an update, and Justice has sent it to me in the form of Kyle Cheney's Blue Sky post, which says, breaking, Merrick Garland, intends to release Jack Smith's 2020 election subversion report. Remember, it's in 2 volumes, right? Presumably 1 volume for the D.C. election case and 1 volume for the Florida documents case. Well, the Florida documents case has a judge that no longer has jurisdiction over the case, but never mind all of that, who says we can't or shouldn't release this report at least for 3 days until after the 11th Circuit says what to do with it. So Merrick's going to split the baby, I guess, because why not? Why not just honor his bad faith efforts in court? I don't know. He's a law-abiding guy. Garland intends to release Jack Smith's 2020 election subversion report on Donald Trump, but not to release the classified documents report while that case against Trump's co-defendants is still pending. There's still litigation. And so therefore, no release of the documents report. We're going to instead give the 11th Circuit a chance to quash that on Trump's behalf. So there we go. The Attorney General intends to release Volume 1 to Congress and the public, consistent with, standing law. 28 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, Section 600.9C, and in furtherance of the public interest in informing a co-equal branch and the public regarding a significant matter. But To avoid any risk of prejudice to the defendants Nauta and de Oliveira, the Attorney General has determined, at the recommendation of the special counsel, that he will not publicly release Volume 2, so long as defendants' criminal proceedings remain pending. For the time being, Volume 2 will be made available for in-camera review, that is to say in a judge's chambers, only by the chairman and ranking members of the House and Senate Judiciary Committees upon their request and agreement not to release any information from Volume 2 publicly. This limited disclosure will further the public interest in keeping congressional leadership apprised of a significant matter within the department while safeguarding defendants' interests. The essential premise of defendants' emergency motion that, absent this court's intervention, Attorney General Garland is certain to make the final report immediately public and thereby cause irreparable prejudice to the defendant's criminal proceedings, is thus mistaken. So I guess they're wrong about that. But will it be important? Should they do it? And should they do it quickly? What does this mean? This means that the current chairs and ranking members, and it's now in Republican hands, both in the House and the Senate, although I'm not certain that all the organizing resolutions have been put in place and adopted. They may have gotten to those things. Sometimes it takes a little while. But remember, I guess I would say it behooves the Democrats here, and certainly the Republicans too, but I don't know that they're going to avail themselves of it. But the ranking members of the House and Senate Judiciary Committees, and I guess we're talking about it will be Jamie Raskin for the House Judiciary Committee. Before I get too far afield, he's supposed to be. He's the Democrats' choice to assume the ranking member position on the House Judiciary Committee. And in the Senate, it'll be Dick Durbin again. And you know how super aggressive he is. Raskin more so than Durbin, certainly. But both of them, I guess now, by virtue of this decision, have the right to go and examine the Volume 2 report if they review it in the judge's chambers, or I don't know whether it's in camera. I suppose that could mean at the Attorney General's office instead, but I'm not sure who's got possession of the report. But they can make a private and confidential review of the report, so long as they don't reveal any of the information in it. Though it might be of interest in particular to the Senate Judiciary Committee because, of course, they will be considering the appointments of top Trump Justice Department officials. And there may be information that pertains to them in there, or there may be information that pertains to, I don't know what. For instance, you'll want to know what the conclusions were in Volume 2 as well as in Volume 1, because some of these people who are being appointed to top positions have just filed motions with the court denying specific acts or intentions on behalf of Trump or other people that are belied by the report. And you might want to have that in mind when you consider their fitness for the job. Not that you'd be able to convince any Republicans of all that. And you can't even tell them what you saw in their report. So, even if you could, they would ignore you anyway. But it's also, it's all very interesting. Now the question is whether the organizing resolutions in the House are in place. I mean, same thing for the Senate too. But I guess if they're not yet taken care of, then for some of the period during which Merrick Garland is still Attorney General of the United States, and there's only 2 weeks left, what if they delay the organizing resolutions such that the House never takes the appropriate action, even if they intend to do it later, of installing Jamie Raskin as ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee, and then sue to block him from exercising what will later on become, or what later on would have become, his right to examine this report in camera. I don't know that they're actually doing that, but that'd be a hell of a ploy. And it's easy enough to find out whether or not he's actually been installed in the position. Just go over to congress.gov and see whether they've passed the organizing resolutions or not. Look for the resolutions naming him as ranking member. It may already be on the record. I haven't done that yet, and you could resolve that pretty quickly if you had the flexibility to do it rather than, say, being live on the air. Kyle goes on to say there's something new here. Garland's decision leaves to Trump's DOJ whether to release Smith's final classified documents report, but he does intend to make a redacted version available to top lawmakers in the House and Senate Judiciary Committees. So even though they have to review it in camera, they'll only get the redacted version of it anyway. So that's rather interesting. I mean, it remains to be seen how it's taken by the public. Oh, well, Garland is going to allow somebody to see it. Yeah, but in redacted form. And there's still, I guess, there still may be a trick for Republicans to play to prevent Raskin and maybe Durbin. I don't know that the Senate has done their organizing committees either, for that matter. All right. Golly, that's an awful lot to consider, but it's out there. Let's see. A few other things that I think are of importance. One is this one. Some of these are, again, from Blue Sky, and I have to click through in order to see what is. Oh, this is from Kyle Cheney as well, but this is from yesterday. That was the news that Aileen Cannon had blocked the DOJ from releasing Smith's report until further proceedings, and I think we got what we needed out of that one. So, okay, there you have it. The current status of some of these ridiculously twisted cases working their way maybe through the courts, but really designed to not get final disposition in the courts and to keep things tied up in litigation until Trump is sworn in and can start making a stronger claim to presidential immunity, even though a lot of these things are regarding unofficial acts. But that's why he wanted to jump in line in the New York case. If he can get a favorable ruling from the Supreme Court early, that there's really no limitation at all, and pretty much whatever he says is official is official. We will rubber stamp it as official. And no, we don't intend to apply that rule equally to Joe Biden or anybody else, right? So there's a lot of people calling for, well, Joe Biden should order the reports released. It's true, he probably should in most cases. Maybe, maybe not, or maybe only a redacted version in the Florida case. That is Jack Smith's recommendation as well, although, I guess at bottom, Jack Smith is a Republican. But presumably he's working in good faith here, and it's his recommendation that not be released. And I think it's because they're trying to preserve the government's right to prosecute a case like this, and to have a more sensible definition of what presidential immunity is and isn't, and of course preserve the presumed constitutionality of the special counsel statute. Now, that might all be wiped out by a Trump Supreme Court or somebody else for that matter, or just, dictatorial ruling. But that's why they're going along with, or seem to be in agreement with Trump, at least temporarily, in terms of whether or not the Volume 2 ought to be released here. They think it could be prejudicial to the case and ruin their prosecution of the case and ruin their appeal that would, if they win, uphold the validity of special counsel law. But, for how long? I don't know. It is a complicated situation, to say the least. Okay, let's see. There's a couple of other things that I need to put on the record, and we have been late in picking up, and I'm trying to decide which ones might we want to throw in there. And golly, there's an awful lot. Let's see. I don't even know where to start with all of this. There's a couple of different directions here. But maybe we want to roll backwards and take a stroll through things as they happened yesterday, as documented by the Blue Sky timeline. Oh, yes. Right. There was one thing. Why isn't this immediately obvious in Pocket? Do I just need to refresh this thing? Did this just not get parked in Pocket? I'm not certain how that happened. But there was a story this morning about, where did that go? How come I have, that I might have to go over to Blue Sky for. But reminder of, I don't know. Well, a couple of things. One, the face-eating leopard principle. And two, just the general things you should be expecting in the Trump administration. The news angle on it is, and I'm pretty sure I reposted something about it, and that's why I'm sort of scrolling to see where this came from or what happened to it, but I guess not. There was news that Trump intends to replace the head of the National Archives. And, well, on the one hand, yeah, sure, of course they're going to do that because it's Trump's prerogative in most cases to replace everybody all over the place, although I don't know whether the archivist, like the FBI director, supposedly has a term in office in order to keep the appointment somewhat less partisan. I'm not certain that that's the case, but he'll be ignoring that anyway, as he will be ignoring it in the case of the FBI director. But what was of interest here was that, remember that the head of the National Archives actually kind of sort of went out of their way to, while criticizing the whole thing and criticizing Trump for his documentations practice, eating official documents, tearing up official documents, stealing official documents, and having to sue to try to get some of those documents back, even so, downplayed all along the seriousness of his infractions. And yet, he's going to eat that face regardless and fire her. She went out of her way to soften the blow of all this stuff. Well, gee, maybe it's not right for you to have stolen all of these nuclear secrets, and you should maybe kind of sort of give them back. And then only as he just continued to blow that whole thing off did they actually go ahead and say, well, we really need to take legal action. And then that's where Trump became mad with her. Like, I didn't mind you so much when you were ignoring. In fact, I guess I kind of liked you when you were ignoring all of my infractions of the Presidential Records Act, etc. But now that you're actually sort of kind of quietly hinting that there was a serious law here after all, and maybe we should be applying it, well, now I'm mad at you. So there you go. Trump, as face-eating leopard, has no interest in what you do with that face. He's just interested in the fact that eventually you've got a face and he'll eventually get hungry, and what the hell, well, I'll eat it later, whether you were nice to me, or very considerate and kind to me, or I like people who say I can get away with breaking the law. And then eventually you say, maybe not so much. Even if you continue to say, yeah, sure, go ahead, then it doesn't really matter very much. I'm going to eat your face anyway. So where is it? I don't know. There was news this morning. I think we can dig that up, note to self to find it. I certainly had news about it from the other day. And I don't know. The volume of news has been such that it's no longer all that easy to find. So, okay. Anyway, I wanted to get that story, the fact that this is happening, out on the record, even if I, can't establish it for you right now. What else have we got for you? Gosh, there's an awful lot. Like I keep saying, I got to pick and choose. Which one is it going to be? How about this one? Just in terms of, I guess it being media criticism of sorts. I don't know that we're going to make it all the way through this one, but no more time for any more crazy Donald Trump stories. What about people who are crazy because they support Donald Trump or have other issues going on? Tom Skoka has this piece in The Defector, Defector.com, asking the question, and it's really, though, I think about the nature of the coverage that the event got. How crazy was the Las Vegas Cybertruck bomber? Which I think really is aiming at how come most of the mainstream media ignored the most extreme elements of the miniature manifestos that he left behind on his phone. And it goes this way. On January 1st, 2 separate American-born veterans of the occupation of Afghanistan died while using a rented truck, only a tenuous connection between them, they both rented their trucks, to commit a sensational act of violence in a highly visible place in a major tourist destination. Although Donald Trump is only too happy to find out that the Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas, it's not a major tourist destination. It's someplace that tourists often avoid because they want to stay at a place with a casino. And Las Vegas wouldn't give him a license. But Las Vegas is a major tourist destination anyway. Shamsuddin Jabbar reportedly pledged his allegiance to ISIS, then drove through a New Year's crowd on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, killing 14 and wounding dozens more before the police killed him in a shootout. The FBI said that he had declared he wanted to call attention to the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers. A few hours later, Matthew Livelsberger, I don't remember how we decided we were pronouncing his name, an active duty Green Beret, apparently shot himself in the head as he ignited a load of fireworks and other flammable material in a Tesla Cybertruck outside the doors of the Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas, leaving 7 other people with minor injuries. Investigators released a text of messages from his phone in which he described his, quote, stunt with fireworks and explosives as a, quote, wake-up call to the country. Which wake-up call? What's it supposed to say? Rally around the Trump-Musk-Kennedy and ride this wave to the highest hegemony for all Americans, he wrote. A pro-Trump message, after all. In response to Jabbar's attack, the New York Times ran multiple stories about the dangerous international ideological influence of ISIS. Amid New Orleans attack, telltale signs of an Islamic State's brutal legacy. How the Islamic State radicalizes people today. I joined ISIS, the New Orleans attackers' secret radicalization. The pieces kept coming even after the investigators declared that Jabbar had acted alone and that his pledge to ISIS appeared to be strictly one way, with no known connection to any of the group's affiliates. Just below that secret radicalization headline on its homepage, the Times had a story about what apparently brought Livelsberger to Las Vegas. Soldiers' struggles began long before Las Vegas blast, Nurse says. A separate article about his messages, published the day before, was headlined, Soldier in Tesla Blast had PTSD and feared U.S. collapse, officials say. He also wanted to help cause it, of course, by killing all Democrats. But, see, that didn't get in the headline. A reader needed to get 2/3 of the way through it, past quotes from Livelsberger about how, quote, our soldiers are done fighting wars without end states, whatever that means, end states or clear objectives, and how he needed to cleanse my mind of the brothers I've lost and relieve myself of the burden of the lives I took. To reach that part about which he wrote that people should try peaceful means first, but be prepared to fight to get Democrats out of the federal government. That's what they need to fight for. Jabbar and Livelsberger were both apparently showing signs of disturbance long before they rented their trucks, with the kind of unstable personal lives that almost always show up in the backstory of public acts of violence. Only one of them got his disturbance turned into a lesson on the menace of ideological radicalization, though. Unavoidably, part of this was that Jabbar was black and Livelsberger was white. Point by point, though, there were less pernicious reasons for the crimes to have landed differently in the media. A mass killing is a bigger deal than a suicide, even if the suicide involves arson and explosives. The Times, in particular, saw Livelsberger as one more case to jam into its ongoing grand investigative theory of the vast hidden toll of traumatic brain injury, which now sprawls from youth football players to Top Gun pilots. But behind any available reasons and rationalizations was the well-established fact that the American press would rather attribute violence to the influence of ISIS than attribute violence to the influence of Donald Trump. ISIS is foreign and fits the consensus popular picture of terrorism. More pressingly, ISIS is not scheduled to be sworn in as president 2 weeks from now. The striking feature of Livelsberger's writing was how ordinary it sounded. One of the two messages released by officials opened with a note-for-note cover of Trump's central campaign message. We are the United States of America, the best country people, that's what it says, to ever exist. But right now we are terminally ill and headed toward collapse. What followed was a litany of standard doomer and or influencer populism, the sort of grievances that the Trump movement runs on and which Elon Musk retooled Twitter to concentrate and amplify. The top 1% decided long ago they weren't going to bring everyone else with them, Livelsberger wrote. You are cattle to them. And a lot of us are just sitting around waiting to die. No sunlight, no steps, no fresh air, no hope. Our children are addicted to screens by the age of 2. We are filling our bodies with processed foods, RFK Jr., and focus on strength and winning. Masculinity is good and men must be leaders. Strength is a deterrent and fear is the product. And then he killed himself, interestingly enough. He complained about homelessness, called DEI a cancer, and declared, while endorsing Donald Trump, we are done with blatant corruption. His other messages were just as familiar in a slightly different key, the apocalyptic operator key of Steve Bannon and the most militant participants in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. And then, of course, the call to block off all the streets and kill all the Democrats in the federal government. Wow. Was this the tone of a mentally ill person? Yes. Was it the tone of the controlling faction of the Republican Party? Also, unquestionably, yes. So do the math there. I think you can.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Well, we got around to the important part of that, and from there I think you can tell where it goes, but that's what it says mathematically, logically. Is this the tone of a mentally ill person? Yes. Is it also the tone of the Republican Party? Yes. Is the Republican Party also apparently mentally ill? Well, yes. Stay tuned now for Justice Putnam. We'll take it a step further, I'm sure. We'll see you tomorrow.